Welcome, I'm the host, John Hotchkiss. This is part 3 of our 5-part exclusive report on the U.S. border with Mexico, the bueno, the malo, and the feo. On this episode of Be Less Stupid, I will take you to the precise spot in Mexico where illegal drugs begin their journey to the U.S. I was there last week. I'll show you the places where drugs are loaded into cargo trucks for distribution, how they're hidden, and I'll take you to the spot where they cross our border. But first, I would like to encourage you to please subscribe to this channel if you're interested in facts, science, and truth. Yes, I am fiercely liberal on social issues and a woman's right to choose. And I really hate the president, a lot. But I'm also open-minded about other so-called liberal causes. I'm not convinced that driving an electric car will do anything to reduce global warming. I think most recycling is a waste of time and money, and I think that in the big picture, Walmart is a net good for America, especially the poor. So, if like me, you've been to a women's march, but were shocked by one of the speakers' enthusiasm for the PLO, this is the channel for you. If you recognize that the preponderance of political issues are nuanced and not black and white, this is the channel for you. If you wish that the media would spend more time showing you things in the news close up, instead of just broadcasting panels of talking heads who seem to never leave Washington, yet inexplicably know with absolute certainty what Americans really want, this is the channel for you. If you prefer information from someone who's been to the place he's talking about, instead of information from a person talking about a place he read about on the internet, this is the channel for you. If you recognize that Nazi ideology must be relentlessly rejected, but are sophisticated enough to also recognize that Nazis have a First Amendment right to peacefully stand on a street corner and reveal their own hideousness, this is the channel for you. One more thing before we move on. While I was in Tijuana last week, I also spent several hours at El Bartal. That's the open-air market/refugee camp where Mexican authorities have placed nearly 1,000 homeless and hungry migrants from Honduras, Venezuela, and Guatemala. These 1,000 people were part of the Central American migrant caravan in November 2018. They would like to apply to the U.S. for asylum, but their efforts are being impeded by both Mexico and the U.S. Oh, we gotta go. Okay. ¿Cuántos años tiene Pablo?
11 meses.
And then, ¿tú tienes familia aquí o solamente
No, solo.
Sue y Pablo?
Sí, solos.
Be sure and subscribe to this channel so you'll be among the first to see this stunning and exclusive report when it premieres next week. Okay, let's move on. Last week, I spent a few days on the U.S.-Mexico border. Not only was I in San Ysidro, where border agents used tear gas on migrants seeking asylum, I also went to several border spots where U.S. construction crews were replacing 30-year-old, 8-foot-high border fence with new border fence that's as much as 30 feet high in some areas. I also visited an area of Tijuana known as Perimetral Norte. It's an enormous industrial area with factories and manufacturing plants on the Mexico side of the border. It's here that goods destined for the U.S. are loaded into trucks. Then, those trucks make their way into the U.S. by crossing the border right here. On the U.S. side, those trucks filled with goods end up here in Otay Mesa, California. The first time I was in Otay Mesa, the government was more transparent about trucks entering the U.S. A year later, trucks have gotten much harder to see. But not impossible thanks to a $100 telescoping pole that lets my camera see over the fence. Take that, Trump. Now, before I tell you about Otay Mesa, the busiest truck crossing border inspection station in the US, and Perimetral Norte, we need to back up just a bit. The US-Mexico border is about 2,000 miles. There's already fencing along about 650 miles or so. There are 27 land ports along the US-Mexico border. Every year, more than 6 million trucks cross one of those land ports heading north. That's an average of about 17,000 trucks per day. The goods in those 17,000 trucks that cross daily are valued at more than $1 billion. Slightly more if one of the trucks is delivering hummus to a Whole Foods. $17 for a pound of mashed up chickpeas? That's fucking crazy. It costs Mexican manufacturers about $600 per truckload in fees and taxes to cross the border. That adds up to about $3.6 billion a year. It's money the government earmarks to pay border guards, and whatever is left, Trump uses to pay down Paul Manafort's debt to that Ukrainian oligarch. Okay, now, back to Otay Mesa in California and Perimetral Norte in Tijuana. On an average day, 2,000 trucks cross from Mexico into the US. That's 750,000 trucks per year, or 83 trucks an hour. These trucks that start on the Mexico side of the border are bringing goods that are vital to American survival, like flat-screen TVs, cold beer and guacamole. The trucks are also bringing in a shit ton of frivolous crap too, like furniture, car parts, and medical instruments. Thanks to trade deals and treaties, the companies in Mexico are required to supervise the loading of trucks so that only, say, doors and window frames are packed into a truck meant to carry only doors and window frames, instead of also 11,000 pounds of meth and pot, valued at more than $7 million, as U.S. Customs discovered during a routine inspection last July. So, how does meth or pot or coke end up inside a truck? As NPR recently reported, drug mafias have thoroughly infiltrated Mexican export and trucking companies. In the same report, NPR also admitted that on 2 separate occasions, Fresh Air host Terry Gross was caught attempting to smuggle rare Aztec candlesticks in her rectum. That was a mistake on her part. Before the trucks head into the United States, they start their trip here in Mexico. So, here's how inspection works. Loaded cargo trucks ready to cross the border line up on the Mexico side of Otay Mesa. Drivers show their manifests to Mexican authorities. On the U.S. side, you'll find agents from the Border Patrol, the Department of Agriculture, and the DEA, who also bring drug-sniffing dogs from the canine unit. The equipment that surrounds the entrance lanes to the U.S. have technology built in that will detect hidden nuclear material. However, and this is where it gets totally fucked up, what percentage of trucks that originate in Mexico do you think are hand-inspected by Border Patrol or DEA to look for hidden drugs or hidden people? And by that I mean trucks that are pulled out of line to have their cargo x-rayed, have their doors opened, have the cargo removed, and visually or mechanically inspected. All of them, of course! This is Trump's America, people! No, I'm kidding. The problem is that although thousands and thousands of trucks come through, only a very small percentage of them are actually inspected by the Border Patrol. The number of trucks that are thoroughly inspected is less than 1 in 5. That's right, 4 out of 5 trucks that enter the U.S. are not closely inspected. Not closely inspected to see if they're hiding cocaine in the guacamole, if they're hiding heroin in bags of frozen fried chicken, or hiding meth disguised as ancient Aztec antiques, all of which were actually found in 2018 among the 1 in 5 trucks that they do closely inspect. 4 out of 5 trucks cross the border with hardly any inspection at all. Once the trucks leave the inspection station, it's just a 2-minute drive down this private road. 2 more minutes in line waiting for the light to turn green, and 2 more minutes before they enter California Highway 5 headed north. If the truck's got cocaine in it, it can be in Los Angeles in 2 hours, 90 minutes if the driver is also a user. The coke can be in San Francisco in just 8 hours, in Chicago in a day and a half, and New York City 3 days later. In fact, the AP quotes a spokesman for the nation's largest Border Patrol union as saying, quote, "Large loads of people and drugs are able to get through." A spokesman for the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, that's the U.S. agency that stations the men and women at the actual border booth. That person told PolitiFact, quote, "Mexico-based trucks permitted to bring goods beyond the border are randomly selected for border and safety inspections." Randomly. Let me repeat that. 1 in 5 trucks is randomly chosen for more inspection than just the cursory test for hidden secret nuclear material. Okay, so Trump has shut down the government because he says there is an emergency crisis at our border, and that the crisis will be solved by a giant wall that will do 2 things: stop illegal drugs and stop illegal immigrants from entering the United States. So, before I dismantle Trump's monumentally stupid idea, it would be useful to know from the Department of Homeland Security the percentage of illegal drugs that come across our land border with Mexico versus the amount of drugs that come into the U.S. by plane or by boat. Oop. I'm being told that information has not been investigated. No one knows if more drugs come in via the land, the air, or the sea. Okay, so we don't know that number. But surely, Team Trump has commissioned a study that reveals what percentage of illegal drugs are carried on the back of any individual person across any, say, random spot along the border versus what percentage comes through one of the 27 ports of entry. It turns out that number actually does exist. In 2017, 90% of drugs seized along the U.S. border were seized at one of the legal ports of entry, either smuggled in a truck, in a car, or strapped to an individual person. Now, there isn't a comparable figure for illegal immigrants crossing into the U.S. However, there are some facts that will fill in a few of the gaps. The number of illegal immigrants caught crossing the U.S. border has dropped from a high of 1.5 million in 1998 to under 300,000 in 2017. That's a decline of 80%.
Una familia?
No, amigo.
Amigos.
Sí, my friends.
And ¿cuál país tú vives?
Honduras. Honduras.
Oh, Honduras.
Of the estimated 12 million people in the U.S. illegally, 44% are estimated by Homeland Security to have come to the U.S. legally, but have overstayed their welcome. The point, nearly half of the illegals in the U.S. did not sneak across the U.S. border. They entered our country legally. So, when it comes to illegal drugs, Trump wants to build a $50 billion wall to slow just 10% of the problem. That's like discovering that mice are getting into your house through a single tiny hole in the floor behind the dryer. And instead of just filling that hole with some steel wool, you regrout all the tiles, add a second story, replace the porcelain toilets with ones made of solid gold, add a gift wrapping suite, put a jacuzzi in every room, including the linen closet, hang a stadium scoreboard in your kitchen, and you build 25-foot tall giant neon letters that spell out your last name and hang them over the front door. Okay, so if a wall isn't the answer, what is? The USA Today spoke to current and former members of the Border Patrol in San Diego, who said instead of a wall, they would benefit more from hiring more border guards and investing in technology, training, and investigative tools like wiretaps and money to pay informants. Only here's the thing, Trump won't do any of that because fixing the real problem of illegal border crossing and illegal drugs correctly would mean his stupid border wall is totally unnecessary. Now, before I sign off, this is now a 5-part US-Mexico border series. In part 1, I laid out 7 reasons the border wall is both stupid and won't work. You can find a link to that video in the description. In part 2, I took you to the spot where Trump said he's building a wall in San Diego, and I showed you that there's no wall there. All they're doing is replacing an old fence with a slightly taller fence. You'll find a link in the description. What you're watching right now is part 3. And in part 4, I will take you to several Tijuana and US neighborhoods and show you the precise streets where the US Border Patrol has found more than 60 tunnels used by the cartels to move more than 200 tons of drugs into the US in the last 10 years. And you do not want to miss part 5. In part 5, I'll take you for an exclusive look inside that Tijuana camp where 1,000 migrants from Guatemala, Honduras, and Venezuela are now living in a kind of squalor, ironically enough, even worse than that from which they escaped. You'll meet lots of people who made the multiple 1,000-mile treacherous journey on foot from Central America through Mexico to the US border, including this single mother and her baby, who, after walking 3 months, have been waiting 3 more months just to apply for asylum in the US.
Pablo.
This guy, who was shot twice by gang members in Honduras because he refused to help them deal drugs, and has been waiting 2 months to apply for asylum. And this guy, fleeing violence in Guatemala, who wants to come to the US to either pick fruit, paint houses, or do construction. Most of these people left friends and family behind, set out alone, and are just looking to make a new life for themselves in a country who until recently welcomed the tired and the poor and the wretched refuse yearning to breathe free and to lift their lamp besides the golden door. Okay, that is it for this episode of Be Less Stupid. Please share this on social media, tell your friends, and make sure you subscribe to this channel. Especially if, like me, you think that it is batshit crazy that 188,000 mostly Christian voters pledged $15 million to put up a wall to keep poor people out of the US when the Bible they claim to cling to specifically instructs them to feed the hungry. For Be Less Stupid, I'm the host, John Hotchkiss. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.